Thanksgiving curse. I used to love Thanksgiving. It was my favorite holiday. Family, food, laughter. But now every time the holiday comes around, all I feel is dread. It all started one year when we decided to spend Thanksgiving in a small town where my grandmother grew up. We thought it would be a nice way to honor her memory, but what we found there, it changed us forever. We rented an old cabin on the outskirts of town, surrounded by thick woods. The cabin was rustic but cozy, with a big stone fireplace and creaky wooden floors. It seemed perfect for a quiet Thanksgiving. But from the moment we arrived, something felt wrong. The air was heavy, like the woods were holding their breath. The first strange thing happened when we went into town to pick up some groceries. An old woman at the store noticed us and asked if we were staying in the cabin. When we told her we were, she went pale. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "Live before it's too late. That place is cursed." We laughed it off, thinking she was just a superstitious old lady, but her words stuck with me. Why would she say something like that? That night, we gathered around the table for Thanksgiving dinner. As we said grace, the wind outside began to howl, shaking the windows. It felt like the cabin itself was alive, groaning and creaking as if something was moving through the walls. My father tried to calm everyone down, saying it was just the wind. But then we heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from the walls, like fingernails dragging across wood. We all went quiet, listening. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, like something was trying to claw its way inside. My mother suggested it might be animals, but deep down, we all knew it wasn't. That night, none of us slept well. I had troubled nightmares, visions of people trapped in the walls, their faces twisted in agony, screaming for help. They were reaching out to me, their hands bloody and broken. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat, and I could still hear their screams echoing in my ears. When I went to the kitchen for a drink, I found my sister already there, staring out the window. She looked pale and shaken. "Did you hear them too?" she asked. I nodded, and we both stood there, too afraid to go back to bed. The next day, we tried to go about our plans, but the tension was thick. My dad decided to explore the woods, hoping some fresh air would clear our heads. While walking through the trees, we found an old, crumbling stone structure hidden in the woods. It looked like a small, forgotten graveyard. There were a few headstones, barely readable, covered in moss. One of the stones had the same last name as my grandmother. We later found out from a local historian that our ancestors had lived in the area, and there were dark stories about their past, stories of mysterious deaths and a curse that had been placed on the family. That night, everything came to a head. We were sitting by the fire when we heard the scratching again, but this time it was louder, more desperate. The lights flickered, and then the power went out completely. We were plunged into darkness, with only the faint glow of the fire to see by. The scratching was now coming from all around us, from the walls, the ceiling, the floors. It was like we were surrounded. Then the voices started. Whispers, moans, begging for help. They were the same voices I had heard in my nightmare. My sister started crying, saying she could feel something cold touching her. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a freezing wind blew through the cabin, snuffing out the fire. We were left in a total darkness, with the voices growing louder, almost deafening. I could feel something brushing against me, cold and wet, like a hand covered in mud. We all ran out of the cabin, not stopping until we were back in town. The old woman was waiting for us when we arrived, as if she knew we would come. The curse, she said. It's real. It's in your blood. We left that town the next morning and never went back, but every Thanksgiving strange things happen, lights flickering, cold drafts, and that same scratching sound in the walls. We've tried to move on, but it's like the curse followed us. Now we dread Thanksgiving, knowing that no matter where we are, the spirits from that cabin will find us. So, if you ever find yourself in a small town on Thanksgiving, and someone warns you about a curse, listen to them, because some things, once awoken, never rest.